Daniel can easily afford the trip. He's run the numbers more than once, and every time they say the same thing, it costs less than what his savings earn in interest most months. He still hasn't booked it. Not because there's a decision left to make. He made it a long time ago. It's always no. The easy explanation is that Daniel is just careful with money. Some people are wired that way. They grew up watching their parents stretch a paycheck, and it left a mark. Frugality became a personality trait, not a phase, and the account balance is just proof the personality is intact. It's a comfortable story, mostly because it doesn't ask anything more of us. But it doesn't survive contact with the people who actually grew up the way Daniel did. Plenty of them go the other direction entirely. His own younger brother had the same kitchen, the same folded bills, the same tight, quiet evenings. And he spends his first paycheck of every month before it's had time to settle in the account. Buys the thing he couldn't afford as a kid the moment he can afford it, as if that's the whole point of getting to afford it. Last Christmas, he showed up with a watch that cost more than Daniel spends in 3 months, laughing about it, completely at ease, and Daniel remembers the specific discomfort of not knowing whether he was annoyed or just baffled. Same childhood, opposite adult, same amount of money on the table either way. If shaped by an early environment were the real explanation, you'd expect the shaping to run in one direction. It doesn't. Something else decided who became Daniel and who became his brother, and it wasn't the kitchen by itself. There's a second problem with careful, and it's smaller, but it matters. Carefulness has a stopping point. A careful person checks the account before a real decision, a purchase, a bill, a transfer, confirms the number, and moves on with their day. Daniel doesn't stop. He checked it this morning standing in the kitchen before coffee, and he'll check it again tonight lying in bed, and nothing about either moment involves spending $1. There's no decision on the table at 7 a.m. or at 11 p.m. Careful is a strategy for when a decision needs making. Whatever Daniel is doing, he's doing it with no decision anywhere in sight, which means it was never really about the decision. So maybe the explanation is simpler than personality. Maybe he just hasn't hit his number yet. Everyone has one. The amount that, once reached, is supposed to flip a switch from anxious to safe. Ask most people what theirs is and they'll answer fast, usually round, usually said with total confidence. Once I have that, I'll relax. Rachel had a number, 26 years old, $50,000, and a plan attached to it. Hit 50, exhale, finally booked the trip she'd been pricing out for 3 years. Flights, a specific hotel she had bookmarked. The whole thing mapped and ready to go the day the balance crossed the line. She crossed it at 29. She remembers looking at the number and feeling almost nothing. No exhale. She didn't book the trip. She didn't tell anyone she'd hit it either. Not out loud, and if she's honest with herself, not really in her own head. Somewhere in the weeks after, without ever sitting down and consciously deciding it, 50 quietly reclassified itself as a number that sounded almost naive to have picked in the first place. Beginner money. The real number, it turned out, was 150. She's closer to that one now. Her sister asked her recently, half joking, what she was actually saving for at this point. She'd already blown past every reason she used to give. Rachel didn't have an answer ready, which surprised her more than the question did. She has a strong suspicion about what's going to happen when she gets to 150, and it isn't a trip. This is the part the hasn't hit his number theory can't account for. The number doesn't hold still long enough to be hit. It moves the instant it's within reach, and it only ever moves up. If the number were the actual target, reaching it should end the search. That's what targets do. It never ends the search, which means the number was never the target. It was somewhere to point an anxiety that needed somewhere to point, and the anxiety was always going to survive the trip to wherever the number happened to be standing. Daniel didn't learn to watch money by choice. He learned it at 9, in a kitchen with the overhead light on because the good lamp had been unplugged to save on the bill, watching his mother count the same folded $20 bill 3 times before deciding out loud what it could and couldn't cover that week. Nobody sat him down and explained the math. He just absorbed the temperature of the room, a specific, controlled quiet that meant a decision was being made that mattered more than anyone was willing to say out loud in front of a 9-year-old. He remembers one specific sentence from that night, said to no one in particular, more to the bill itself than to him. "This has to last until Thursday." He didn't know what would happen if it didn't. He never found out because it always did, somehow, every week. But not knowing what the failure would have looked like turned out to be worse than knowing. His imagination filled in something worse than whatever the truth actually was. That kind of quiet doesn't stay in the kitchen it happened in. It gets filed away as information about how the world works. Money can vanish, and when it does, the people you depend on get very careful, very fast, and nobody tells you why until you're old enough to have already learned the lesson without the explanation. Daniel's brain didn't file that evening as a memory to look back on. It filed it as a standing rule to operate by. Whatever else that evening planted, it also left a habit that outlived every reason for it. Daniel still checks the account most mornings, before he checks anything else, even though he already knows exactly what it says. Not because he doubts the number. He checks it the way some people check a wound, just to confirm it's still there. Here's the layer that actually holds up under pressure. Our brains don't weigh a loss and an equivalent gain the same way. Losing $100 doesn't just feel bad in proportion to the $100. It feels roughly twice as bad as gaining that same $100 feels good. That's not a personality quirk or a character flaw. It's a documented asymmetry in how people evaluate risk, first mapped by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky in the late 1970s, and it shows up with almost eerie consistency across completely unrelated decisions. How people gamble, how they invest, how they negotiate. Now run that asymmetry through someone who watched a loss actually happen in a specific kitchen at a specific age. The math isn't abstract for him the way it is for someone who's only ever lost money on paper. It's calibrated against a real, remembered version of what not enough felt like. So the fear of losing what he has doesn't shrink as the account grows. It scales with it. A bigger number simply means a bigger number that could, theoretically, be gone. That explains the wiring. It doesn't explain why the wiring never updates, why decades of boring, repeated evidence that the money is completely safe never once outvotes a rule laid down in about 4 minutes, one evening 30 years ago. 3 years ago, Daniel crossed the exact number he used to scrawl inside the cover of a school notebook as a teenager. The number that, at 17, was supposed to mean he'd made it. Whatever made it meant to a kid who'd never actually had it. He remembers the specific afternoon he saw it hit. He does not remember anything about his actual life changing afterward. Nothing was different that evening. He made the same dinner he always made and went to bed at the same time. The trip is not hypothetical. It's this year, their actual 10th anniversary, the coast they'd talked about since before they were married. His wife has already priced it out and left the tab open on the shared laptop, hoping he'd notice. Every time he opens it, something tightens in his chest before his mind even finishes the sentence, and he closes the tab and tells himself next month, once things settle. Nothing is unsettled. There's no threat anywhere on the calendar, no emergency waiting in the wings, nothing but a week at a coast and a wife who stopped bringing it up out loud. He cannot make his own body agree to release the money, even for something he genuinely wants. Even when every number in front of him says it's completely, boringly safe. 2 weeks ago, she finally said it directly, standing in the kitchen, the same kind of kitchen, different decade, asking him what exactly he thought was going to happen if they spent it. He didn't have an answer, not a real one. He said something about being careful, about not knowing what might come up, and heard how thin it sounded even as he said it. She didn't push further. She just looked at him for a second longer than usual, and went back to what she was doing. His wife books nothing now and says nothing about it, and that particular silence in the house costs more than the trip ever would have. Here's where the loss aversion explanation runs out of road. It tells you why Daniel weighs the risk so heavily. It does not tell you why he needs the risk to keep existing at all. Why a threat that has been financially dead for years is still being kept on life support somewhere in the back of his head, fed just enough to stay breathing. Because if Daniel ever actually let himself believe he was safe, genuinely, permanently, no longer checking the balance safe, he wouldn't just relax. He'd have to retire something. For 30 years, the one who watches the money because money can vanish has been who he is inside his own family. It's the reason he was the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who never let anyone down the way the world let his mother down that one evening in the kitchen. Declare the threat officially over, and that role has nothing left to guard. He'd just be a man with money, like plenty of people who got lucky and don't think twice about it. No longer the one who survived something and stayed sharp because of it. The vigilance was never a burden he was waiting to put down. It was a resume. Go back to the kitchen table, to Rachel and her $50,000. Same trade, dressed differently. She didn't move the number because 50 stopped being a lot of money. She moved it because reaching it would have meant admitting the years of not booking the trip had been about something other than the trip. Easier to relabel 50 as beginner money than to sit with that. The fear was never really protecting the money. The money was protecting the fear. As long as there's still a threat out there worth watching for, there's still a reason he matters the exact way he's always mattered. Enough was never a number he could reach. It was an identity he couldn't afford to lose. And no amount in an account was ever going to be the thing that talked him out of needing it. Notice what that means about the thin answer he gave his wife in the kitchen. He told her it was about being careful, about not knowing what might come up. And he believed it while he was saying it. That's the part that makes this different from lying. He isn't hiding the real reason from her. He doesn't have access to it either. The vigilance explains itself to him in the vocabulary of risk because that's the only vocabulary it's ever needed. Nobody's identity announces itself as an identity. It just sounds, from the inside, like common sense. So the balance was never really the question. The real mechanism is this. Some fears aren't there to warn you about a real, current danger. They're there to keep a version of yourself employed. And the moment that version would become unnecessary is exactly the moment the fear digs in hardest. Dressed up as caution, dressed up as being careful, dressed up as just one more month before anyone books anything. The price shows up in the obvious place and in the quieter one underneath it. It's the anniversary trip that never happens, the tab that sits open on a laptop no one closes, the specific way his wife has stopped mentioning the coast at all. Not out of anger, just out of having run out of ways to ask. It's Rachel, a decade from now, still one number away from the number, telling her own kids the version of the story, where she's just naturally cautious, the way her mother told it to her, and watching one of them absorb it exactly the way she once did. And under both of those, it's something harder to put a figure on. A person who spends 30 years standing guard against a danger that expired years ago, and who will keep watching an empty room rather than admit the watch is finally over. Because if the watch is over, there's the much harder question of who he is when nobody needs him to be careful anymore. That question doesn't come with a due date. It can wait another year. It always has. The trip is still not booked. Daniel will check the account balance again tomorrow morning, standing in the same kitchen before the coffee's even done. Not because the number might be wrong, he knows exactly what it says down to the dollar, but to confirm the story is still true. The one where he's still the person who has to watch, still the person who can't afford to stop. What number are you still waiting to feel safe at? And what would you have to stop believing about yourself on the day you actually got there?